It starts with the little things. Your favorite activities aren't as invigorating anymore. A routine is long lost. Every task requires a little too much energy. It's like you're treading water. Every movement requires monumental effort. This feeling is a combination of lacking motivation, feeling like every day is the same, becoming disconnected, weaved all together with the endless desire of staying on your phone all day. I didn't really understand it, nor could I put into words what I was feeling. On the incline was my sleep, my screen time, and knowing I'm becoming lazy without any motivation to change it. As my frustration grew with the failure of not being able to understand what I was going through, I stopped and surrendered, sort of riding the wave of emotions. And this, my friends, is when I realized I'm stuck in a rut. So what does it mean to be in a rut? The general definition of being stuck is to fall into a predictable routine, but lacking enthusiasm and struggling to find purpose in your everyday activities, which ultimately leads to a feeling of detachment and sort of mundanely going about your day. A rut can masquerade itself in so many different ways, depending on who you are. But the good news is there's a solution. This state of inertia can be defeated if fought with enough force. I think it was back in like May 2020 when the exhaustion of dealing with this state of mind peaked for me. I wasn't really sure how to tackle this. I was willing to try different methods until I found one that would yield the results I'm looking for. Then I came across bullet journaling. Bullet journal is a personal organization tool used for goal tracking, scheduling, to-do lists, and in my case, habit tracking. I created my journal to log my daily habits over the span of a month. I noted how often I was reading, working out, maintaining a healthy diet, doing something creative, and sleeping a maximum of 8 hours. My goal was to figure out if and how my daily habits correlated with my mood. My goal within the first month of using the journal was to monitor triggers that led me into a downward spiral. So each day, I'd check off which of the 5 things I was doing and end the list by rating my mood from 1 to 10. 1 being lazy, unmotivated, and 10 being happy, energetic, and optimistic. Charles Duhigg wrote, "To overcome habit, we must recognize which craving is driving the behavior." And that's exactly what I intended to use my bullet journal for. So starting in June, I began to log what I was doing every single day. When I started, I'd look over my daily habits over the past week and I began to recognize a pattern. The days my mood was lower than a 6, I didn't engage with any of my hobbies, nor did I work out. Screen time was well over 4 hours, mostly spent on social media apps like Instagram and Twitter. Another thing I noticed was that instead of getting out of bed right away, I would spend like 30 to 40 minutes scrolling through social media. This is one habit that I noticed had the tendency to set the tone of a really sluggish day ahead. So now comes the question, how do I replace these bad habits with healthier ones? What I decided to do was gradually apply the habit loop method I picked up from The Power of Habit. Essentially, the habit loop consists of the cue, routine, and reward cycle. The cue acts as the precedent or trigger for the routine. The routine is your habit, and the reward is a sensation you feel from that habit. In the case of spending like the first hour of the morning on my phone, I realized that the craving behind that action was to see what I had missed out in the social media sphere overnight. I realized the cue was my alarm, the routine was to scroll, and the reward was that short rush of dopamine. To eradicate the habit of picking up my phone, I needed to integrate a replacement to the routine of scrolling. First change was to keep my phone by my window, where it wasn't easily accessible for me in the morning. Now my cue was still the alarm, but instead of turning off my alarm and turning over in my bed and just scrolling for 30 minutes, it was now to open the blinds and start my morning more naturally. That is, away from a screen. It wasn't easy to resist the temptation to just grab my phone and jump back into bed, but the feeling of accomplishment that came out of exercising my willpower served as a reminder that I'm doing something good for myself and set a very positive tone for the rest of the day. The key is to start small and gradually integrate positive habits into your day. So the next week, I wanted to start incorporating a different habit, either a physical activity or a hobby. So I'd follow the same formula. I would catch a negative habit loop, keep the cue, change the routine, and reap the same reward. Like reading, for example. Normally, after making a cup of coffee, I would sit on the couch and reply to emails. The reward was checking another thing off my to-do list. But on the days I was feeling unmotivated and lazy, I knew that reading was one of the last things I would be doing. And I didn't want the mindset of being stuck in a rut to keep me distant from my love of reading. So I needed to incorporate that into my routine somehow. So I lured myself towards a book rather than grabbing my phone right when my coffee was made. So I left my phone upstairs in my room and I would take a book downstairs and have it with with me while I was making my coffee. But the reward was checking off a hobby on my bullet journal rather than something on my to-do list. I mean, life is no fairy tale, so no, my mood didn't automatically just shoot up when I pushed myself to do things I didn't want to. But the longer I kept pushing myself, the easier it got to do the things that I knew would ultimately benefit me. In fact, I started regaining that excitement and found myself steadily coming out of that rut. Once I started working out regularly, eating healthier became easier. Once I started getting through half a chapter of a book, I'd be able to read 1 or 2 chapters in one sitting. It was like a chain reaction, and I continued that way. I managed to accomplish all I wanted throughout the day, but instead of being weighed down, I would have that optimistic energy. The trick is to shift your habits so that eventually your brain starts to expect these rewards, starts to crave that sense of accomplishment. Gradually, by the end of the month, I started seeing my mood change from between a 1 and a 4 to fluctuating around a 7 and an 8. And that, you guys, is a huge achievement to where I was just a month before that. So now let's roll into July. My bullet journal experiment hadn't failed me just yet, so I decided to try it out for another month. I continued to log my daily activities. The previous month gave me a visual representation of how integral it was to keep up with my healthy habits in order to experience a better mood. So I worked hard to keep that cycle up. I'd say the biggest reward of staying consistent with a bullet journal and switching up my habit loop was the ability to catch myself when I was falling. A bad day stayed just that, a bad day. Maybe it would go into 2 days, but never longer than that. So through this experiment, I was able to figure out a pattern in my habits and trace back to the triggers that brought me down. Another encouraging factor of keeping up with a bullet journal is to hold yourself accountable. What actions you're taking to get yourself out of a rut. Seeing that I had gotten myself out of that rut gave me the strength to do it again. And looking back and reflecting on your growth is one of the most rewarding feelings. And a bullet journal can encapsulate that perfectly. At the end of it, I realized I needed to calm myself out and get back on track. Because once you realize you're on a regressive path, you can make the decision to fix things or keep going downwards. Our minds can play games with us sometimes, but we have it within our capacity to catch ourselves when we're falling. And make sure to pick up and return in a direction we're meant to be following.